Good morning, and welcome to the Morning Breath Livestream, where we start our day with coherence. I'm your host, Jeremy Tennell, systems designer and coherence coach, and this is week 13, day 65 of our 14-week journey entitled The Path of Personal Transformation. Today is Freeform Friday. I take the scripts from the week and I upload them into chat to produce questions for myself. The goal here is not to simply talk about self reflection, self awareness, self regulation, and ongoing self inquiry, but to model it. So I use these questions in order to try and do that. It's a clunky attempt with the medium we have. I have not, I've read through my script. I always read through my scripts, but I have not come up with answers for these questions. There's a couple in here that really had me thinking. And so I'll answer those for you as openly as possible. This week we explored institutions, history, conspiracy, and rebellion. For the first time in this journey, we intentionally focused outward, not to blame society, not to fear the world, but to better understand the systems shaping human behavior, identity, belief, and culture. If we cannot see the systems around us, we will then become unconsciously shaped by them. On Tuesday, this week began, because of the holiday weekend, with a discussion on institutions, the structures that shape civilization, governments, education, media and finance, religion and care. At their best, institutions create stability and continuity. But institutions are systems, and all systems operate on incentives. So I want to begin there. Question one: what institutions have had the greatest influence on my worldview? I would have to say that the two institutions that I listed would be religion and education. And in many ways, they're seen in our society as opposing forces, which is unfortunate because they're not. But as a young boy, I grew up. I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up in it was an evangelical home, in fact. And my grandfather was a Southern Baptist minister, making my grandmother a preacher's wife. She was great at that job, at that role. She was kind, she was gentle, she cared, and she was an incredible storyteller. At a very young age, I would sit on her knee and she would read me Bible stories. And that was my first exposure to the stories and the narratives outside of myself, outside of my worldview, outside of which was tiny, and the lessons that went with them. As I got older, in fact, when I got into high school, nobody in my family had ever graduated from a four-year college. My grandfather, the pastor, did get a AA degree, but nobody had ever finished for a bachelor's degree in my family. And so I wanted to go to college. And it was the 90s, and it was the big push for um, for reputation building and credibility through education. People, we believed that education was the great equalizer. And so I went to college. And then I went to get my master's degree 15 years later. And now I'm wrapping up my PhD 10, 15 years after that. I've followed education I stopped following education because I thought that it was the right thing to do. And I started following it because I began to want to understand the world around me better. And now I'm writing to contribute something to that understanding. Next question. As trust in institutions continue to shift, what responsibility do I have to develop my own discernment rather than outsourcing my thinking to authority? I saw this question last night and I really appreciated it. I think I've always had a problem with authority. Some of us are born rebellious, some of us become rebellious, some of us never rebel whatsoever. I think the combination of my household that I grew up in and my parents divorced when I was very young and the dichotomy that it created between the two households that I was raised in, between my mother's household, which was fairly new age and fairly exploratory and open, and my father's household, which was fairly rules based and evangelical and strict, created something in between, and that in between was a rebellious streak that I carried with me throughout my life. I think that that this question about responsibility to develop my own discernment became really important in the era in which I became an adult, which was this past 25 years, the millennium era. It might be a bit anecdotal, but the systems and the institutions that held the world together before I was born have crumbled in the past 25 years. And they're to the point now that there's no denying it. You can see it. The corruption is crazy, and it doesn't matter what side you want to lean, what of the binary you want to lean. Both sides of authority are completely lost. I think that this really came home for me with COVID. I was very disturbed to see people leaning into listening to authority rather than seeking truth for themselves. And that's what fear does. Fear puts you in a position in which you seek authority to tell you what to do because you don't know what to do. And it's very clear that can be and is ongoingly taken advantage of in our society. On Wednesday, we explored history, not simply as a collective of facts and dates, but as narratives. And as history shapes how societies understand themselves. Often, what we inherit is history, is a story told from a particular perspective. So question 1, what historical narrative shaped my understanding of the world? And when did I begin questioning them? You know, I think when you grow up in a evangelical home and you're told stories like, the world is 6,000 years old and the 7 days of creation are literal, it automatically puts you in opposition with the narratives that you're taught as a kid. I mean, even to this day, I can sit and listen to a documentary or something when I'm over visiting my folks, and maybe Attenborough will say something like, the world is 6 billion years old, and or something, and it my father just automatically responds with the narrative that we grew up with, um, and and so one, I was already growing up in a situation where I was questioning that narrative, but then I questioned the narrative that I was brought up with as I grew up. And I started to realize as I studied and as I read for myself that both can be true. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to fall into a binary with it. Both can be true. You know, uh, myth has power and it holds truth. It might not hold the clarity of truth of this desk is made of wood, right? But it's, it holds truth in a much less linear way. And so to allow, say, the Genesis story to be what it is, a mythological narrative that is teaching something far deeper than what the words say on the page, and the world is 6 billion years old, that's, both can be true. And so once I was on that journey, I realized I don't have to collapse into a singularity. I can hold multiple truths. Question two: what voices, perspectives, or stories do I need to seek out to better understand the systems? What voices, perspectives, or stories do I need to seek out to better understand the systems I live within today? This one I kind of got hung up with a little bit. I think there are voices, perspectives, and stories that I don't even know. Those are the ones that I need to seek out. Not the ones that I know and I've thought through and maybe I don't jive with or I don't agree with. Um, Many of those I've sought out to try and understand. Most of those I've sought out to try and understand. I've gone pretty deep in trying to listen to voices, perspectives, and stories that aren't my own. Um, and some of those were ones that were on the periphery, and some of those I had no idea until I came across them. Those are the ones that are important. Yesterday we moved into conspiracy. And this may be one of the most important conversations of the week because questioning systems matters. Seeking truth is vital, but remaining coherent while doing so is key. So the first question is, where have I noticed myself becoming emotionally attached to narratives? I, you know, okay. I I was a really big conspiracy theorist in the early 2000s. I think, honestly, I think it started with, well, it started with 9/11, and I dug into that rabbit hole, and I learned how to do research, and then the JFK assassination, and it goes on and on and on and on. I learned a lot about narratives in that process. But I also learned that diving into rabbit holes wasn't helping anybody, certainly not me. I became so emotionally wrapped up in seeking and harboring and holding this truth and really kind of charged by this idea that I knew something that no one else did, and they could if they just simply scratched the surface on the veneer of our social system. And but the reality is that holding on to those narratives, attaching myself to those narratives. Everybody else was emotionally attached to their narratives too. And so when I was trying to message everybody, actually, that's what Plowline originally was. I mean, I deleted most of that content, but it originally was this idea of trying to find a way in order to get people to see, to awaken, to become aware, the truth is out there. And what I realized was that we all are living with our little t truths, our perspectives and our paradigms. And I was too. And that didn't necessarily make that right or wrong. It just made it mine. And I was trying to push it on everybody else. People have got to come to their conclusions and their truths on their own. What this has evolved into, and really actually through education, right? Through a master's degree in systems design and through a PhD now in systems and complexity. The idea here is you're going to believe what you want. The goal is to ensure that you are equipped with the tools in order to grow personally in that belief, in those thoughts, in those ideas. And that comes through practices of self-reflection, self-awareness, self-regulation, and ongoing self-inquiry. Question 2, how do I pursue truth without allowing certainty, fear, or identity to replace curiosity and discernment? Practice, 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 practice. When I find myself, I'll give you an example. I have been doing this live stream for 65 days. And in this live stream, I'm having an opportunity to be able to write scripts and share ideas that I've been holding on to inside for years. And even if nobody is out there watching, being able to exercise that is very, it's a positive thing. And sitting here recording myself, cutting these shorts, putting them up on all the social media sites so that there's these little clips of wisdom. There's a part of me that there is the threat of becoming moralistic, not just sounding moralistic, but internally becoming moralistic. Where you're preaching. And I remember that very distinctly from my grandfather. He was very, very good at it. It can be powerful to some degree, but it ends up setting you apart. And that is a terrible place to be. So that's one example. I drafted a final script that we never went through because of the holiday on Monday. It would have concluded this week's wisdom teaching on rebellion, the possibility that much of what we call resistance has already been anticipated, commodified, and absorbed by the systems we oppose. Because systems drive on predictability, and reaction alone is not transformation. So based off of that, there were a couple of pretty good questions that came out. So I'm going to just go through these. The first one is, where in my life am I reacting to systems? Well, I mean, in many ways, I think my life is a response at its best and a reaction at its worst to the systems around me. I spent the past decade, my wife and I have gardened for, 20 years. she got it started. I built her some raised beds, but I got very serious about it about 10 years ago. And the reason I did that is because I wanted I wanted to be I wanted to be good at food security for myself and my family and my neighbors. And I wanted to ensure that I had what I needed in order to in order to eat, produce food. And then I reached back, I knew both of my great grandmothers. And so I reached back to what they did when I was a small kid. I learned how to can. I learned how to preserve. I learned how to dry. And I'm pretty good at it. Well, no, I'm getting good at it. I'm getting good at it. That's probably some content I should share some more on this channel with. And so that is a response reaction to the system for sure, because I don't trust it. I don't trust the system. I think that the system we have constructed for ourselves and the path and trajectory that we've been on for the past 25 years is not sustainable. It's not. And I think that's on purpose. And I think that if you listen to these tech CEOs, these AI CEOs, they're taking the evolution of an extraordinarily powerful tool, and just like when the internet first came out, some of you might not know this, right? You might have grown up with it your whole life. But when the social platforms first started and the search engines first started, the algorithms behind them were not predatory. And so there was this incredible feeling of community, and this is going to change the world, and we are all going to be able to participate in it. And then the algorithms got rolling behind them, and they became these awful predatory things. Screens have destroyed and are continuing to destroy lives. AI is the same way. It's this incredible tool, and we're being given it free now because it requires it requires a training data set. We are that training data set. It was released into the wild so that it could learn. But once that process is over, it's going to be predatory. So that's the system I'm reacting to. Question number 2. If I stop defining myself by what I oppose, what would I be called to build instead? This one really caught me. I had to think about this quite a bit, and if I were to come up with something, it would be a normal life. Normal life. I went down the rabbit hole a long time ago, and some of what I uncovered was, real. Regardless, it was real. And you pair that with my religious evangelical upbringing and the ideas that I was given about end times, and that combination puts you in line for not living a very normal life. I pursued ideas, truth, systems thinking, and systems understanding, so that, I guess, honestly, so that I could be doing what I'm doing right now. I think that I always wanted to hold a lantern up in the dark. And I think things are getting very dark. And if I didn't feel like there was some opposition to the systems around me, I don't know that I would see those things or want to see those things. I think that I would get up, I'd make my coffee, I would, you know, shit, shower, shave, go to work, you know, pay my mortgage, raise my children, and repeat the cycle, you know? But I didn't do that. All right. We went long again. I think one of the things that we're going to be doing on Friday is that it's going to be a call for you to begin practicing breath work on your own. So Monday through Thursday, we will practice together. But on Fridays, I want you to take 5 minutes, set a timer. I want you to take 5 minutes, and I want you to sit and I want you to do the breath work on your own. And inhale 5 or 6 seconds through your nose and exhale 5 or 6 seconds out your mouth. Create that pattern, hold that pattern, and then begin a list of gratitude in your mind. Expand that gratitude and hold that for 5 or 6 minutes. Do so. Return to gratitude and breath every time you're distracted. Don't stop. You can do this. These daily practices are so important because repetition builds patterns, and transformation occurs when we build new patterns in our lives. So we're going to end the call today with, we're going to end the live stream today with a call for you to take the next 5 minutes and sit with your breath and your gratitude this morning. If this resonates with you, stay with the practice. I would greatly appreciate if you would like and follow my channels, YouTube in particular. It's easily found, and it would really help. The feedback is always helpful. Don't forget, the most powerful systems are often the ones shaping you without you realizing it. Take a breath. I'll see you on Monday, 5:30 a.m.